The dim glow of a laptop screen in a San Francisco apartment became the portal to a dark, lawless underworld that most people couldn't even imagine. It was 2011, and a man known only as Dread Pirate Roberts was quietly building an empire in the shadows. His creation, the Silk Road, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. An online marketplace operating entirely on the dark web, where anonymity was currency and illegal goods flowed freely. Drugs, counterfeit documents, hacking tools, and even hitman services were just a few clicks away. For those who stumbled upon it, the Silk Road was a modern-day black market, protected by layers of encryption and the untraceable magic of Bitcoin. But behind its facade of freedom and anonymity was a ticking time bomb, one that would explode with devastating consequences. Ross Ulbricht, the mastermind behind the Silk Road, wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to create a criminal empire. He was a quiet, idealistic man in his late 20s with a background in physics and engineering. By all accounts, he was an intelligent and unassuming individual, the kind you'd meet in a coffee shop and never think twice about. But beneath his ordinary appearance lay a radical vision. Ulbricht believed in libertarian ideals, a world where individuals could make their own choices free from government interference. He saw the Silk Road as more than a marketplace. It was a statement, a rebellion against the systems of control that dictated society. And in the shadows of the dark web, his vision began to take shape. The Silk Road was built on the backbone of Tor, a software that allowed users to browse anonymously, and Bitcoin, a digital currency that promised untraceable transactions. Together, these tools created the perfect storm for a black market that was virtually invisible to law enforcement. At its peak, the Silk Road had over 10,000 products listed, and transactions worth millions of dollars were being processed monthly. Vendors operated with a sense of impunity, rating each other for reliability, and customers left glowing reviews for everything from narcotics to fake IDs. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem, as sophisticated as any legal marketplace but entirely underground. But the rise of the Silk Road wasn't without its dangers. The anonymity that protected its users also attracted some of the darkest corners of humanity. Stories began to circulate of drug overdoses linked to products sold on the site, as well as violent crimes facilitated by goods and services procured there. The darker the Silk Road's reputation became, the more it attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies around the world. It wasn't just a question of stopping drug sales. It was about dismantling a system that had exposed the vulnerabilities of the digital age. Ulbricht, operating under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, was meticulous. He maintained his anonymity through layers of encryption and carefully curated personas. To most of the Silk Road's users, he was a myth, a ghost who wielded immense power yet remained untouchable. But as the site's notoriety grew, so did the scrutiny. The FBI, DEA, IRS, and Homeland Security all began working together to crack the Silk Road's impenetrable veil of secrecy. Their goal was clear: they needed to find Dread Pirate Roberts and bring him down. Meanwhile, Ulbricht's life in San Francisco continued as if nothing was amiss. He worked on his laptop in coffee shops, went to meetups, and mingled with friends who had no idea of the empire he controlled. But cracks were beginning to form in his armor. He had made mistakes, small ones that seemed insignificant at the time but would ultimately lead to his downfall. A post on a public forum under his real name, an old email address tied to the Silk Road, a package intercepted by customs. These breadcrumbs were all the FBI needed to piece together the puzzle. What no one knew was how close law enforcement was to unraveling the mystery of the Silk Road. Agents were working in secret, infiltrating the site as buyers and sellers, painstakingly collecting evidence while trying to avoid detection. And as they closed in on their target, the walls around Dread Pirate Roberts began to crumble. But Ulbricht didn't know it yet. He was still the king of his digital kingdom, unaware that his empire was built on borrowed time. As the FBI's net tightened, Ulbricht found himself in a game of cat and mouse with the full weight of the US government bearing down on him. And in a twist that no one could have predicted, his arrest would happen in one of the most mundane places imaginable, a public library in San Francisco. But how did they catch him? And what secrets did they uncover in the process? The answers lie in the next part of this gripping tale. By the summer of 2013, the Silk Road had become one of the most infamous marketplaces on the dark web. Its user base had grown exponentially, and transactions worth millions of dollars were being processed monthly. Law enforcement agencies from around the world were pooling their resources, desperate to pierce the layers of anonymity that protected the site's users and its enigmatic creator, Dread Pirate Roberts. For Ross Ulbricht, the walls were closing in, but he was blissfully unaware of how close the FBI was to discovering his identity. What made the Silk Road so difficult to trace was its reliance on Tor for anonymity and Bitcoin for transactions. These tools gave users a sense of invincibility, a belief that they could operate without fear of detection. But no system is perfect, and the cracks in the Silk Road's armor began to appear. Federal agents working undercover as buyers and sellers infiltrated the marketplace, amassing evidence that would eventually point them in the direction of Dread Pirate Roberts. Meanwhile, analysts were poring over mountains of digital breadcrumbs, trying to connect the pseudonym to a real person. Ulbricht had made mistakes, small, seemingly insignificant ones, that would become his undoing. Years earlier, he had posted on a coding forum under his real name, asking for help with Tor and Bitcoin-related software. This post, buried in the depths of the internet, was tied to an email address that investigators later discovered was linked to the Silk Road. Another slip came when a customs agent intercepted a package of fake IDs addressed to Ulbricht's San Francisco apartment. These IDs, allegedly intended for use in securing multiple servers, were another piece of the puzzle. By mid-2013, the FBI had identified Ulbricht as a person of interest. But identifying him wasn't enough. They needed to catch him red-handed. The Silk Road was a vast, encrypted operation, and shutting it down required more than just a name. Investigators began to surveil Ulbricht, tracking his movements and observing his behavior. What they saw was shocking: an unassuming man in his late 20s, living a modest life in San Francisco, spending hours on his laptop at coffee shops and libraries. It was hard to believe that this quiet, unremarkable figure was the mastermind behind the largest black market the internet had ever seen. The FBI's plan to capture Ulbricht was as bold as it was precise. They couldn't afford to give him any warning or allow him to close his laptop. Doing so could encrypt the Silk Road's files and make the evidence inaccessible. Agents devised a strategy to arrest him while he was logged into the site as Dread Pirate Roberts, ensuring they could seize his laptop and secure the evidence they needed. The operation would take place in a public library in San Francisco, where Ulbricht frequently worked on his laptop. On October 1, 2013, undercover agents entered the Glen Park branch of the San Francisco Public Library. They spotted Ulbricht at his usual table, typing away on his laptop. The agents positioned themselves strategically, waiting for the perfect moment. One agent pretended to be a patron, sitting nearby with a book, while others stood ready outside. The tension was palpable. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and the entire operation could be compromised. The signal came when Ulbricht opened the admin panel of the Silk Road, confirming that he was logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts. In a coordinated move, one agent created a distraction while another grabbed Ulbricht's laptop before he could shut it. The arrest was over in seconds, but the fallout would echo for years. As agents combed through the contents of the laptop, they uncovered a treasure trove of evidence: chat logs, transaction records, and the digital keys to the Silk Road servers. Ulbricht's carefully constructed empire had been built on the illusion of invulnerability, but it crumbled in an instant. For the FBI, this was the culmination of months of painstaking work. For Ulbricht, it was the end of a dream, and the beginning of a nightmare. What the FBI found on the laptop was staggering. Detailed records of Silk Road transactions revealed the scale of the operation, while personal journals written by Ulbricht provided insight into his motivations and fears. Most damning of all were chat logs where Dread Pirate Roberts discussed the management of the site, including alleged attempts to hire hitmen to silence potential threats. Whether these plots were real or bluffs remains a topic of debate, but their inclusion in the evidence painted a dark picture of Ulbricht's activities. As the media caught wind of the arrest, the story of the Silk Road and its mysterious creator captivated the world. But the tale wasn't over yet. The trial of Ross Ulbricht would raise questions about freedom, responsibility, and the limits of anonymity in the digital age. In the final part, we'll explore the trial, the fallout from the Silk Road's closure, and the legacy of the man who dared to create a marketplace without boundaries. Ross Ulbricht's arrest in a San Francisco library marked the end of the Silk Road's reign as the most notorious marketplace on the dark web, but it was only the beginning of the fallout. As the FBI's evidence became public, the true scope of the Silk Road's operations stunned the world. Billions of dollars had flowed through the platform, funding everything from drug deals to counterfeit goods and even alleged assassination attempts. For law enforcement, the capture of Dread Pirate Roberts was a landmark victory. For Ross Ulbricht, it was the start of a long and controversial battle that would forever define his legacy. The trial began in early 2015, with the prosecution presenting a mountain of evidence collected from Ulbricht's laptop. Files on the device contained meticulous records of Silk Road transactions, chat logs between Dread Pirate Roberts and site administrators, and journals written by Ulbricht himself. These documents provided a detailed account of how the Silk Road was created, managed, and ultimately compromised. Prosecutors argued that Ulbricht had knowingly facilitated illegal activities on an unprecedented scale, creating a platform that empowered criminals to operate with impunity. One of the most shocking revelations during the trial was the evidence suggesting that Dread Pirate Roberts had ordered hits on individuals who posed a threat to the Silk Road. Although no murders were ever confirmed to have been carried out, the chat logs showed Ulbricht negotiating with alleged hitmen to eliminate potential informants. The defense claimed these messages were fabricated or the work of imposters using the Dread Pirate Roberts account. Regardless, the allegations cast a dark shadow over the idealistic image Ulbricht had cultivated. Ulbricht's defense team painted a vastly different picture. They argued that while he had created the Silk Road, he had handed over control to others long before his arrest. They claimed he was framed by unknown parties who had taken advantage of his libertarian ideals. The defense also highlighted Ulbricht's lack of prior criminal history and emphasized his belief in free markets and individual choice. For Ulbricht, the Silk Road wasn't a criminal enterprise, it was an experiment in personal freedom, albeit one that had spiraled out of control. The trial captivated public attention, raising questions about the limits of personal responsibility in the digital age. Was Ross Ulbricht a libertarian visionary, or was he a criminal mastermind who profited from the exploitation of others? The answer depended on whom you asked. For some, he was a scapegoat, a symbol of government overreach in its quest to control the internet. For others, he was a dangerous figure who had unleashed chaos by creating a platform with no moral boundaries. In February 2015, after weeks of testimony, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on all counts. Ulbricht was convicted of conspiracy to traffic narcotics, money laundering, and computer hacking, among other charges. The sentence was harsh, life in prison without the possibility of parole. The ruling sent shockwaves through the tech community, where debates about privacy, freedom, and government control were already raging. For Ulbricht's supporters, the sentence was excessive, a punishment that failed to account for his motivations or the broader implications of his actions. The closure of the Silk Road didn't mark the end of dark web marketplaces. In the years following Ulbricht's arrest, dozens of similar platforms emerged, each learning from the mistakes that had brought the Silk Road down. Law enforcement agencies continued their efforts to combat these sites, but the dark web remained a battleground of anonymity, innovation, and criminal enterprise. The Silk Road, despite its fall, had set a precedent that could never be undone. Ross Ulbricht's legacy remains deeply polarizing. To his supporters, He is a martyr for freedom, a man who dared to challenge the status quo and paid the ultimate price. To his detractors, he is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unregulated technology in the wrong hands. His story has inspired documentaries, books, and countless debates about the ethics of online anonymity and the role of government in the digital age. As Ulbricht serves his life sentence, the questions raised by the Silk Road continue to haunt the world. What are the limits of freedom in an interconnected world? Can anonymity be preserved without enabling harm? And what responsibility do creators bear for the unintended consequences of their innovations? The Silk Road story is far from over. It's a story that evolves with every new marketplace, every new technological breakthrough, and every new debate about the future of the internet. If this glimpse into the rise and fall of the Silk Road has left you questioning the boundaries of freedom and technology, don't stop here. Subscribe to our channel to uncover more gripping stories from the dark web, the hidden corners of the internet where intrigue and danger collide. From secret marketplaces to real-life tales of deception and betrayal, there's always more to discover. What's the next secret you'll uncover? Hit that subscribe button, and let's journey deeper into the shadows together.